What if your future self is waiting behind the next tiny decision you make today? Not a perfect plan, not a dramatic gesture, not a life-altering vow shouted from a mountaintop. Just the smallest, stubborn step you decide to take right now, and then repeat tomorrow, and the next day after that. That's the pattern I want you to see clearly today. Change rarely arrives as a single thunderclap. It arrives as a sequence of small, repeatable moments that compound into something you barely recognize a year from now. Let me start with a story you might not expect. A few years ago, there was a friend of mine named Maya. She worked a demanding office job, felt stuck in the same routine, and carried a whisper of a dream she didn't quite dare name out loud: to write a book. Not a blog post, not a chapter here and there, but a full novel. The dream rattled around in her head like a loose marble in a box, always threatening to roll away when the day got heavy. She tried to force herself to write for hours on end, and predictably, she stalled. Then, one evening, she decided to do something almost ridiculous. She wrote one sentence, just one sentence, on a sticky note on her computer. The sentence wasn't polished, it wasn't clever, it didn't matter. It existed because she chose to put it there. The next day, she added a second sentence. The day after that, she wrote 3 sentences. Pretty soon, she realized 2 things. First, the words started to flow more easily when she wasn't aiming for perfection. Second, the act of showing up even for a few minutes gave her a feeling of ownership over the process. A few weeks in, she had a page. A month in, a chapter. By the end of the year, she had a manuscript that felt like her voice, rather than a performance of someone else's idea. It wasn't a bestseller about to topple the market, but it was hers. She had proven to herself that the distance between I can't and I did wasn't a chasm. It was a line she could cross again and again, because she chose to cross it with intention, a little at a time. That principle isn't rare or mystical. It's practical and universal. The truth is this: you don't win your life by waiting for the perfect moment. You win it by deciding that the next moment will belong to you, even if it's as small as tying your shoes, writing one sentence, taking a 2-minute walk, or sending a single email you've been avoiding. The real magic is not in the magnitude of the act, but in the steady rhythm with which you repeat it. Think back to your own life for a moment. When did you feel your best momentum? It almost always comes after you've made a tiny decision and kept it. The marathon runner who starts with a 60-second jog on day 1. The student who studies 15 minutes before bed and ends up mastering a subject. The entrepreneur who sends one outreach email and then another, until a spark becomes a stream of opportunities. Momentum isn't a burst of energy. It's the consequence of choosing to show up again and again, even when the energy isn't spilling out of you in abundance. Let me give you another story, closer to home, and perhaps more ordinary. A teacher who changed a classroom by changing herself, slowly. Mrs. Patel taught 5th grade in a town where kids came with different kinds of homework that didn't always fit the classroom. She didn't overhaul the curriculum in a weekend. She started with one tiny change. After lunch, she would spend 2 minutes writing a note of encouragement to one student, a small gesture that said, "I see you." She did this every day, not for a month, but for a year. The effect wasn't dramatic at first, but it was tangible over time. A student who used to shovel excuses began to show up with a different posture. Eyes a touch brighter, shoulders a little straighter, a readiness to try. A culture shifts not with a grand speech, but with many offhanded moments that tell people you're paying attention. If you're listening to these stories and thinking, "That's neat for them, but I don't have that kind of time or talent," I want you to hear one counterintuitive truth. Consistency compounds in slow motion. It's easy to underestimate how much you'll underestimate how far you can go when you start small and remain steady. Every minute you invest in a tiny habit, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there, doesn't feel monumental in the moment, but stacks of those minutes, day after day, become weeks with noticeable progress, then months with visible change, and finally a year where you can hardly recognize the person who began. Let me walk you through a practical framework you can apply tonight, no matter where you are in your life. It's built around 3 simple ideas: commit, create, and continue. 1. Commit to one tiny action. The key is tiny. If you want to write a book, commit to writing 250 words a day. If you want to get in shape, commit to a 5-minute walk. If you want to learn a new skill, commit to 10 minutes of deliberate practice. The constraint matters because it removes the paralysis of not enough time. The commitment isn't about how much you'll do tomorrow. It's about what you can reliably do today. 2. Create a tiny ritual that makes it easier to start. Attach the new action to something you already do. Habit stacking is your friend. For example, after you brush your teeth in the morning, you write 2 sentences in your notebook. After you settle into bed, you spend 5 minutes mapping out your next day. The trick is the cue, the action, and the reward. Cue reminds you, action gets done, reward reinforces the behavior. The reward can be as simple as a moment of quiet pride or a quick stretch to celebrate progress. 3. Continue with accountability and reflection. Track your days, not your outcomes. A streak calendar, a quick journal entry, or a brief message to a friend can keep you honest. Once a week, review what happened, what helped, what tripped you up, what you'll adjust next week. When you see your pattern clearly, you can fix the leaks and steer toward the course you want. Here's a concrete, tested example you can steal for yourself right now. Suppose you want to publish your own project. Let's call it a passive project you care about, but keep delaying because it feels too big. Break it into daily micro-steps. 2 minutes of outlining, 5 minutes of writing, 10 minutes of design, 1 email to an ally for feedback. Do the smallest possible version of each step. You'll find that by day 7 or 14, you've started to produce real, usable material. By day 30, you've created something that your future self would be proud to own. The key is trusting the math of small steps. I want to include a couple more stories that illustrate the same principle from different angles. There was a musician who believed she'd never play again after a long pause. Instead of trying to practice for hours, she set a ritual. Every day, she played 1 note, just 1. Then she kept the note for a count of 4, and that was it. Over weeks, she added another note, then another, and before long her fingers remembered, her breath found its rhythm again, and she rediscovered her voice. The re-entry was not flashy, it was patient and persistent, and it worked because she trusted that starting tiny would lead to reclaiming a larger portion of herself. There's also the story of a software developer who faced a mountain of backlog tasks and the dread of infinite scrolling emails. He implemented a 2-minute rule. Whenever a task felt overwhelming, he would start with exactly 2 minutes. If, after 2 minutes, he didn't want to continue, he could stop. Most days, he found he did want to continue, because starting loosened the knot in his brain. The backlog began to shrink not because he found more time, but because he changed how he approached the work, with permission to begin, with permission to stop if needed, but with a bias towards starting again the next day. It wasn't speed, it was the willingness to show up consistently. You might wonder, what about motivation? Motivation is wonderful when it arrives, but it's unreliable. What you can reliably cultivate is the discipline to begin. Motivation tends to arrive after you begin, not before. That's why the tiny steps become a strategy for life, not a temporary hack. Another element that makes this work is identity. The small steps you choose are not just tasks, they are declarations about who you want to become. When you write that first sentence, you're choosing to be a writer. When you lace up your sneakers for 2 minutes, you're choosing to be someone who takes care of their body. When you send that single email, you're choosing to be a connector, a person who reaches out to create opportunity. Your brain starts to rewire around those small affirmations, and with time, the new identity begins to feel natural, almost inevitable. As you listen, you might be thinking, this sounds good, but what if life throws a curveball? Great question. A curveball doesn't invalidate the approach, it tests it. When disruption happens, and it will, you revert to the smallest possible action you can control. If you lose your job, write 1 sentence about your next career step. If you fall out of a routine, stand up and do 2 push-ups. The point is not perfection. The point is persistence. The micro step gives you a way to respond under pressure without needing a miracle. Now, if you're listening and feeling a tug of possibility, here's how to begin right now, today, in the exact 10 minutes you have before the day ends. Pick 1 micro action that would move you toward a real goal. It must take 2 minutes or less, no exceptions. Decide where you'll do it, a desk, a hallway, a kitchen counter, and what cue will trigger it. After you brush your teeth, after you finish lunch, after you wake up. Set a simple measurement. I'll do this thing every day for 7 days. If a day is missed, reset the clock and begin again the next day. Tell someone, a friend, a coworker, or even your audience here in the comments. Saying it out loud makes you more likely to follow through. In the end, this isn't about grind or grim determination. It's about choosing a slightly better version of yourself, one tiny action at a time. The compound effect of those tiny choices is quiet but unstoppable, like water wearing away a riverbank, not with a single blow, but with 1,000 patient droplets. Before we close, a moment of reflection. I want you to picture your future self again, not the mile marker version, the one who's wealthy or famous. Rather, the one who shows up consistently, who doesn't abandon the thing they care about, who treats their own progress with respect. What did your future self thank you for today? Was it for starting that journal, for reaching out to a mentor, for choosing to run a 5-minute route instead of sitting on the couch? Hold that image, let it anchor you. And let it remind you that the next tiny step you take isn't a distraction from your life, it's a deliberate gift to your future. If you found a spark in these stories and this approach, I want you to take one concrete action now. Leave a comment below with your intended tiny action for the next 7 days. Tell us exactly what you'll do. For example, I'll write 250 words per day, or I'll walk for 5 minutes after lunch. If you're comfortable, share your cue and your method of tracking your progress. This isn't about bragging, it's about building a scaffold of accountability that helps you lean into consistency when motivation fades. And if you're hungry for more support, subscribe to this channel. We'll keep returning to the same core idea. You don't need a dramatic epiphany to change your life. You need a steady stream of tiny, repeatable steps that align with who you want to become. We'll explore more stories, more practical frameworks, and more ways to turn intention into daily action. To sum up, you're not aiming for a single breakthrough moment. You're stacking up small, stubborn decisions that over time become your new normal. The next moment is your best chance to begin. The next tiny action is your clearest invitation to begin building the life you want. So go ahead, pick your 2-minute task, decide where you'll do it, start tonight, and come back here tomorrow to tell us how it went, how you felt, and what you learned. Your future self will thank you for it. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Remember, the door to change isn't heavy, it's just a hinge and a little push. And the push you need starts with a single, tiny step. Take it now, reach out, begin again, and keep going, one small, stubborn step at a time.